Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at how to make a 4K time-lapse using the Sony PlayMemories Time-Lapse add-on that's compatible with many of the popular Sony cameras. Sony PlayMemories camera apps have been around for years now, and the number of different add-ons has really grown over time. Some of the apps are still really just gimmicks, however there are those that are genuinely well thought out and can inspire photographic creativity a great deal. Today we're taking a look at the PlayMemories Time-Lapse add-on. The original application wasn't that great, but hey, that was many years ago when Sony had barely made its mark in the mirrorless camera market. A couple years later, and it has really evolved to be a very useful add-on that every photographer should have. It still has quite a few shortcomings though, but we'll talk about those a bit later. At $10 US, you really expect the time-lapse application to be best in its class and be completely faultless. Unfortunately, that is far from the case. It's quite shocking that even in 2017, the app still doesn't support 4K time-lapses or even 8K on the cameras that have the megapixels for that. Instead, you're stuck with 1080p resolution video exports, which frankly just don't cut it anymore for some of us in the modern day. What's even more surprising about this is that all the cameras that support the application shoot 12 megapixels or higher photos, meaning that technically they have enough pixels to generate stills that are higher in resolution than true UHD 4K. Now, even though the app itself won't make 4K time lapses, there's still a way you can create stunning 4K or even 8K time lapses on the camera models that allow for it. And that's what I'm going to be showing. Just before we start, you're going to need a compatible Sony PlayMemories camera that supports the time-lapse add-on. Any non-linear editor of your choice, we're going to be using Final Cut in this demonstration, and any photo editing software like Lightroom or Photoshop. I'm going to be using my RX100 Mark IV in this video, and have no fear if you have a different model because the procedures are exactly the same. One of the first things I always do before I set up for the time-lapse is I go into the camera settings, then scroll all the way to the right to the briefcase sub-menu to turn off audio signals. What this does is that it'll switch off all the audio signals like digital shutter sounds that your camera makes when it's taking the snaps for your time-lapse. I find that it drains battery and gets pretty annoying after a while. We can now launch the time-lapse application like so. I'm in the intelligent auto mode, which isn't supported by the app, so I need to switch to either program, aperture priority, shutter priority, or full manual mode. Let's go ahead and use manual exposure for this video. Once inside the app, you'll need to set up some parameters. Hit the menu button, then application top. Here you can select which theme you want to use. For this video, we'll go with the custom theme simply because I like to have full control at all times. You'll then be returned to the viewfinder once again. Hit menu again, and this time select application settings. Under file format, you want to select the middle icon, which will take individual stills and store them onto your SD card. You can also select an interval that's appropriate for the type of time-lapse you're trying to shoot, and pick the number of shots you want to take. You can see at the bottom right corner that the app automatically calculates the amount of time required to shoot the number of shots you want at the selected interval length, which is very much appreciated. Under the auto exposure or AE menu, you want to select lock AEL, simply because you do not want any strange jumps in exposure during your time-lapse if the lighting changes quickly. You can hit the center button to accept all settings and you'll be returned to the viewfinder. Before you shoot, just make sure you run through all the settings once more, which can be found on the current screen. So we are in custom mode, shooting only stills with auto exposure locked. Our interval is 10 seconds and we want a total of 240 shots. Sounds good. The rest is simply just composing your shot and making sure exposure is in check. I always like to shoot with a custom white balance so that the color temperature doesn't dramatically change midway through the time-lapse in auto mode. Now it's important to note that the time-lapse application can be counterintuitive sometimes. For example, the RX100 Mark IV has a built-in ND filter that can be turned on and off. However, you cannot access the function directly from the time-lapse app, which doesn't make sense at all because if you exit the application and activate it from the camera's main viewfinder, then relaunch the time-lapse app, you'll be surprised to see that the ND is now fully functioning and turned on within the time-lapse application. So as you can see, there are still a few not so well thought out things with this app, and it's really disappointing that Sony still hasn't addressed any of these issues many years later. After taking your shots, you want to import the images into a photo editor. I'm going to be using Lightroom here, but any other photo editor should be more than capable. So you want to import all your time-lapse photos, and then at this point all you have to do is edit them like how you'd edit any other photos. In Lightroom it's pretty straightforward because you can edit just one of the images and then copy all the settings to the other photos. Here's a quick pro tip for all Lightroom users. If you want Lightroom to automatically choose a black point, you can hold Shift then double click blacks. This can also be done with the whites. Saves you a little time. So I think I'm done touching up this photo, so I'll select all the other images and sync the settings to them all. Once that is done, you can now export them. Making sure that all the images are selected, head over to File, then Export. If you scroll down under the File Settings menu, make sure you have JPEG selected with a full 100% quality setting. sRGB color space should also be selected. You can export the images into a folder, which I will now do, and that's pretty much it. All you have to do is let Lightroom do its work, and when it's done, it'll open the folder where the pictures have been saved. For the last few steps, we're going to be in Final Cut Pro. The first thing you want to do is create a new project that is on a UHD 4K timeline. Let's go to File, New, then Project. You can give your project a name if you want to, and really all you want to change is the video format to 4K, then resolution to 3840 by 2160 for UHD. If you want to go with other 4K resolutions like DCI, you can do that too. For frame rate, I usually just go with 24p. I find that it gives you the longest time lapse for each sequence of images because you have 24 frames per second, which is pretty much the lowest frame rate acceptable for video. The rendering doesn't really matter since the final video will most likely be distributed in a streamable format anyway, so you can ignore that and hit OK. Once on the timeline, you want to import your time-lapse images by right-clicking under Clips, then opening the Import window. Here you can navigate to the folder where the photos were saved from Adobe Lightroom and import them. Your photos will now be in the Final Cut library, and what you want to do is make sure they're highlighted and then drag and drop them into the magnetic timeline. This can really take a while depending on the speed of your computer, but once it's done, you might notice that sometimes the order with which the photos have been arranged from start to finish is actually in reverse. Don't worry about that for now because it's easily fixable later. With all the images highlighted, you want to right-click on any one of them and select Change Duration. I usually start with a duration of 1, which will make each picture 1 frame long. So what this means is that each second will display 24 of your time-lapse images. It all just depends on the interval length you used when shooting your time-lapse. You can experiment with different durations to figure out what gives you the smoothest looking results. Now most of the time, your images will have 2 black bars on the sides because of the aspect ratio with which they were shot. To fix that, all you have to do is select the first image in the sequence, make sure it's selected, and then click on this drop-down arrow and go to Crop. This will allow you to select a 16:9 aspect ratio crop to make sure you get rid of those bars. From there, you can press Command-C on your keyboard to copy. Then select the remaining photos and click on Edit, Paste Attributes in the top left menu. This will paste the crop settings to all the other photos. So after that, all I do is highlight all the pictures in the timeline, then right-click and create a new compound clip. This will join everything together into one joint clip where the photos will play from. When that is done, you want to click on the clip so that it's highlighted, and then click on the speedometer icon and click Reverse Clip. This will fix that reverse issue we're talking about earlier. Now my images were shot at 20 megapixels, meaning that we have about 2.5 times more pixels than 4K UHD. This really gives a lot of freedom in terms of cropping, panning and tilting effects, and it also means that we usually get a higher resolving 4K UHD image. The very last step is to just render out your 4K or 8K time-lapse and you're done. So there you have it folks, that is how you can create a 4K time-lapse using the Sony PlayMemories Time-Lapse application. In this video, we worked with Adobe Lightroom and Final Cut. However, any other photo editor and non-linear editor work just as well. The procedure for making an 8K time-lapse for those of you that have cameras with 32 megapixels or higher is exactly the same. The only difference is that you have to import your photos into a 8K timeline instead of a UHD 4K one. Thanks for watching, and I hope that this video has been useful to you. Please leave a like or a comment, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as turn on notifications from this channel for more videos like this. Catch you folks in the next one.